We're going to welcome Nikki to the show today. She is here to talk about her Psi experiences, which are many. Um, and she's going to go first. She's going to be our first interview, which is so exciting. Welcome to the show, Nikki.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited. I
Great.
am very excited to share.
Me too. Me too. Um, so I'm just going to go right into the questions. What is your comfort level with discussing your Psi experiences?
I'm really comfortable with it. I think normalizing it is important. I think it helps others to understand that that wasn't just a coincidence that you brushed off, or maybe somebody helped you in a way that just a stranger and you just like, how did they know? I want people to think that it's normal. I want them to be aware that it's normal. It's a part of all of us. So I'm super comfy. Yeah.
What kinds of Psi experiences have you had? I mean, I know your list is long.
It is.
Category-wise, what are they like?
So I clairaudience, clairvoyance is my strongest. Dreams. I don't ignore my dreams. I get these feelings, the clairsentience, the feeling that something is going on around me, or that I need to pay attention to something else, or it's all of it. And it's only in hindsight sometimes do we see it, but it's everything for me. And I get it in very subtle ways, but I get the extreme ways too. And I have no practice, no anybody telling me this is how to do it. It's just something happens or you become aware of something that's going to happen. And then it happens. And we are so conditioned to be like, what a funny coincidence when that starts to accumulate and you start to realize that there's too many for there to be a coincidence. And it's it just becomes this collection of events that make you realize something else is going on and just becoming aware of it.
Very cool. Um, I just love that. Was there any specific attitude towards Psi or spirituality in your upbringing?
We weren't outright said, you're this or you're that. It was always, I would hear my family say, a voice in my head. And I just thought it was a thought when I was little. But they validated us in other ways where we would say we had this dream or I think you need to be careful and I have this bad feeling. And they would come back and say, if you hadn't said that or you hadn't told me about that dream or that happened, what you dreamed about happened. That's how they validated us. They never like shunned us or pushed us aside. They always said, if you go to them and said something, once you verified and you had countless times, the more likely they were to listen, no matter how crazy or off the cuff it sounded, the more likely they were to listen. And the more they listened, the more information spirit seemed to give, especially when things had to be done or time was running out in certain areas where they needed to do something. Spirit would definitely come into whoever they could find in the house that was listening. And a lot of times that was us kids because we weren't bogged down with the day-to-day stress of life.
What kinds of Psi experiences do you currently have? And like, what's the regularity? It's pretty much integrated into your life full time, yeah?
Yeah, I am. If I don't have the answer and somebody's asking me a question, I'm like with spirit. I'll be like, I'll get back to you. Just give me a few minutes and I'll ask spirit if they have any advice. Or spirit will just pop in and be like, you should bring this up. Um, I am a daily meditator and I meditate every night before I go to bed to bring myself out of my own headspace. And spirit uses that to communicate, whether it's just, hey, you might want to pay attention to this or you might want to check on that. Spirit uses that communication time when I make the space to give me the information I need. But I've also gotten more comfortable, and I guess comfortable is the wrong word. I've stopped pushing it off as coincidence. And now I'm going to Spirit more often and saying, what do you think about this? Or, you know, especially when uh, a family member was getting really sick to their stomach and it was all the time. And I'm like, what do we need to do to change? How do we change the diet? And he was really stubborn about it. And I was like, Spirit, you got to help me here. He's not listening. And all of a sudden he's like, so what can I do again? And the stomach aches and the indigestion and all the gastrointestinal stuff just stopped. And that was Spirit. I am not a doctor. So that's what I use it for. I use it to help my family. I use it to help people. I could be in the grocery store and Spirit's like, that person, go walk by that person and smile. And I'm there. Like, and it sounds so mundane, but sometimes that's all they need. Sometimes the people we see, the strangers we meet, all they need is a smile. All they need is your energy around them. And so I'm constantly listening now. And Spirit has kind of realized that I can I can be that person in that space when it's needed. And that has been, I love it. I love how it guides my life now. So, there's other times where Spirit's like, deal with this distraction so you can find where you're going. There's this tree I wanted to go see. It sounds crazy because it's a tree, but it's a witness tree. It's like 700 years old. I'm like, I want to go sit in the roots of that tree and meditate. And this was during COVID, and I would have never found it. This guy stops me and asks me for directions, and I stopped to help him. And it was because I stopped to help him that I ran into the skeleton crew that was currently at the park where I could ask directions to the tree. If I hadn't stopped, I would have never found it. It's a huge park. So I use that. I communicate what I want to Source, and Source is like, we got you. Well, we've got you going on. It's okay. Just trust in the process. It's not always instant answers. It can take time, and it's just trusting in the process. So,
Well, how old were you when you realized you were having psi experiences and that it wasn't just coincidences?
I was 42.
Hey, so not like crystallizing when you were 11 or something.
No,
How
I
did that
was
go? Is that a story you
42.
want to share?
Yeah. So I had been meditating for a year straight, trying to astral project because I wanted to speak to my spirit guide. I knew I had one. I
The one
was like,
that's
I
inside
wanted,
you mean?
yes, I knew I had one. And I'm laying in bed and I finally get my brain to just be quiet so I can go to sleep one night. And I hear this, look around you, wake up. Is this loud enough for you? And I'm like, and I dense. I will never say I'm not. And I sat up in bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and looked around the room expecting like this apparition or something in my room. And I was just like, I didn't see anything. And I was like, can you talk like that all the time? That volume is perfect. It wasn't until the next morning when I told my husband about the experience where he said, really? That long, huh? It took you this long? And I was like, yeah. And he wasn't chastising me. He was just kind of like poking fun at my density. But I realized that it's everything. It's the yellow butterflies. I walked out into my yard and it smelled like I walked into acres and acres and acres of roses. It was so strong. There's no roses anywhere. And I get these, I just realized it's every single thing. Everything that I have always blown off as coincidence is not coincidence. I asked spirit for a sign that everything was going to be okay, and my dog gets sick and has to go outside. And you would think that is just a horrible sign. But when I go outside, there's a blue jay building a nest that I would have never seen had he not have dragged me outside at that exact moment. And spirit is constantly communicating. It is all the time. And when I started looking back after that moment, I realized I could write novels on the amount of experiences that I have had. And I realized that that voice in your head isn't always just your thoughts because it sounded so different. And it was just, it, I was so grateful to have had that communication and to recognize after that the subtlety in which spirit communicates. I've, the amount of gratitude I've had in my heart since waking up to all of this and being aware is monumental, and it changes your life. It brings forth, you have a whole toolbox. And I was one of those people that would watch videos like this and say, that's not me. But the truth is that it is you. If you're watching a video like this, there's a reason. Spirit is trying to get your attention. Spirit wants you to know that I'm here, I'm listening, I'm helping. I want you to hear me. That's how spirit feels. I want you to hear me. It's so important. And it's, like I said, I'm just so grateful that spirit was able to get that message through in the fashion in which they work. It's so loud, but it really is life changing, and it gives you a whole new set of tools, and it helps you to relax into life better. It helps you to be more secure in your day to day. So when the stress comes, and it's always going to come, there's nothing that stops the stress and the responsibility of life. When that comes, you can go to your toolkit and say, what do I need to do? How do I need to fix this? Is everything going to be okay? And spirit will help you. They'll put you on the path. They'll put the breadcrumbs there, and you just have to be aware enough to follow them. And I love that. And I just want people to be aware that that's what spirit wants. Spirit wants to communicate and help. It's, there's a, I use the movies because I am big on wanting to like jump into a video and like help the character I'm so invested in, or the book. And that's what spirit does with us. Spirit is, here's the tools. Why don't you see them? Because they're jumping into that book and into that movie for them and helping us. And they're giving us what we need. It's just, it's up to us to be aware of those things, those warnings, those breadcrumbs, all that help.
So do you have any hate to call it advice, but do you have any tips for anybody who is trying to connect to spirit, but they haven't had that big voice that says, wake up, here it is? Do you have any tips or instructions or pro tips, anything you want to share?
Understand that you're always connected. You are connected 100% of the time. It doesn't matter. It's being able to hear it. And in order to hear it, you have to practice teaching your brain to be quiet. And it's practice. It's not something that you can just, I just want my brain to stop being what it does, and then it is. It's you have to practice it. The best way to practice it is just that constant, nope, I want to be quiet. And you're as quiet as long as you can in your minds. And as soon as your brain starts to go off into that mental space and starts chattering at you, you just have to bring it back in and be like, no, just need to be quiet. Now is the time. Those short breaths through the nose and then out through the mouth, the longer ones, help to switch your sympathetic nervous to your sympathetic nervous system. And you're out of that adrenaline mode of stress and worry and all of that stuff that causes just so much head stuff. And when you do that and you switch into that calmer nervous system, And it's scientifically proven. It takes 3 minutes of just 4 seconds through the nose and 6 seconds out of the mouth in slow fashion. And it doesn't even have to be that specific time frame, that your body will switch into a calmer nervous system. And once you're there and you've practiced the silencing of the mind, pay attention to what you're feeling, what you're seeing behind your eyes if they're closed, or if you're looking around your environment, what jumps out at you, what words might jump out, what random thought just popped into your head. Was that you, or was that spirit trying to tell you something? The more you practice mental silence and being aware, the more likely you are to experience something. But you don't want to go in expecting something. You don't want to go into it thinking, oh, everybody does this and I can do it too, and no practice at all. You need to practice because everything in life takes practice, and you have to go into it as open-minded as possible, because the way you think you communicate may not be the way you actually communicate. It may be the feeling of images, not the images themselves. It may be temperature changes in your environment. It may be a mood that just all of a sudden you're just light or not so light. Ask spirit to, and then once you start getting stuff, ask spirit to clarify, to give you more, because spirit wants to talk to you. They want, I cannot stress enough how much spirit wants to talk. And when they start going and you're really getting into that and you've done all the work in the practice, it becomes a constant stream, a constant awareness, constantly asking, and it becomes your go-to, it becomes your spirit, becomes your confidant.
So,
They become your advice givers.
so do you feel that this part of your life is now more integrated into your 3D life, that your psi life and your, here and now five senses world are more integrated? Like, or do you still have like two separate, you like compartmentalized, this is when I do this and this is when I do that?
I am all the time. If I have a question that I cannot answer, I am constantly, spirit, what do you think? And there are times where I'm not as integrated, where I have my very human life and my very human things and worries and stresses. And I do get into that very human mental scape where, oh goodness, I got to get this done, that done, the house has to be clean, and so sick. And once I have gotten better about pulling myself out of that and being like, what's the most important thing right now? Everything's going to be fine. This will all blow over. What do I need to focus on right now? And if I don't have the answers, I start waiting, telling spirit exactly what I'm looking for, what kind of answers I need, and just waiting and watching. And it's the most mundane things. It's the yellow butterfly in the yard. It's the smell of roses. It's a tap on the shoulder when nobody's there. Sometimes that happens. It's that inspiration. That is, it will come to you a lot of times as inspiration. You're inspired to do this. So it's very much become a part of who I am in my day to day.
Do you feel like these skills are part of your purpose in life?
I do. I've had a really long life that has geared me towards being just, I want to help others. I want to help others be happier. I want to help others be relaxed when they're stressed. I want to help them through that stress. And I know that sometimes that's not my job, but when it is my job, I want to be able to do that as efficiently as possible. So without these abilities, I would not be who I am today. I don't know if I would have risen above my challenges and my path. Um, this gives me the ability to give somebody a smile that I wouldn't normally smile at a stranger. I'm usually do what I have to do, get it done. And now I spirit's like, you need to put a smile on your face to go to the grocery store today. And I'm like, okay. I'm not big about the grocery store, but okay. And usually I'll bump into a few people that their energy is just I don't want to say like down and out, but you can feel that they're just struggling with something. So I make it a point to smile at those people and to like give some of that energy that's mine to them to bring them up. And it's really hard to feel down and out when there's a genuine smile on your face. And usually the smile from a stranger will elicit a genuine smile where they're like, it's not that bad. And I do my best to when people ask, even and strangers like to talk to me. So if I open up a dialogue and just sit back, they'll usually just unload and I can get rid of that. I can give that up to the universe and be like, can you just cleanse this? Sometimes they'll say something and I know they just need some kind thoughts in their direction, that frequency of energy in that direction. And so that's how I work with it right now. I leave comments in comment sections when people ask questions or people are sometimes in a certain subsection of videos you get a lot of depressed comments and it's not even the ones you would think it is. I'm always in there just love and light and just giving people just some empathy, just enough so they know that other people understand how they feel and they're not as alone as they think they are, because that's all we need is to realize this is not just us. That's all anybody wants, is to be loved, and they don't feel that way all the time. Or if ever, there are people, sadly enough to say, that are walking through this planet that don't feel any love. And those are the people I want to help, like in my day to day life. For this, it's important to talk about this. It's important to normalize it because learning how to connect with spirit, seeing that others can do it, stop pushing it off as coincidence. And I did ask spirit about this. I'm like, why are we doing this, spirit? Spirit's like, because people need to learn how to connect. I'll take care of the rest. You don't have to worry about that. You just have to show them it's possible. And the people that need to hear it will recognize it. And once they've connected, I will take care of it. I've got this. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. That's small. I'm good with that. And that's all I want to do my whole life. That's all I want to do. I just want to help people feel loved, feel safe, feel secure, and know their value. And I see a whole world of people that they say they do, but you see evidence that they don't, that it's not sunk in completely. This provides better coping skills. And that's coupled with like the normal coping skills that we have, like the journaling and the meditating and getting away from society sometimes and being out in nature. But this is just a part of the toolbox that really helps be who you want to be as a person. Not even who anybody else wants, just who you want to be. And I think it's innate in all of us. I believe every one of us on this planet has the ability to do this. It's, you have to make awareness for it. You have to understand that we are so bogged down with our day to day, our worries, our stresses, that it's hard to be aware of it. But when you start practicing space and making space for it, you'll realize that this is possible for everybody and that with just a little bit of space and a little bit of grace within yourself, you can talk to spirit on a regular basis, or you can get the communication that you need for that event or that advice. Or it's just, it's so difficult. We have so many distractions that it's difficult to come out of that and just make space to be aware. And that is something I'm very passionate about. I'm sorry.
That's fantastic. Thank you. What wonderful answers you're giving.
For me, I want to focus on the individual, because it starts in all of us. If we change ourselves, and then enough of us have changed ourselves, society will naturally change. We're always going to have the disruptors. We're always going to have the people that stand there and challenge us to be better people. And that's our moment to shine, right? And I'm not saying don't be aggravated or upset. Like, that's a very human response. But when you pull yourself out of that and you see it for what it is, you recognize that. And it takes time. It took me years to realize how much I've changed. And I and it was such a slow process, but once you get there, it's worth the journey. And I've learned so much from the journey and from the healing that the trauma that I've healed from, that I know it's possible. It's just people need help. How do you know how to fix something if you don't have help? How do you know it's even a problem? I mean, maybe it's kind of worked for you your whole life, or everybody else is doing it, or everybody else responds that way. Like I said, you have your very human response. But when you bring yourself out of that very human response and you start to look at it from all sides, you realize that that entire brouhaha was coming from nothing but a place of trauma. And it's necessary, but it doesn't have to be the norm anymore. It can change. So telling people that, sharing that, just be aware. And when I say be aware, I mean, be aware of how you feel on a normal basis. And when that changes, ask yourself why that just changed. Did you have a thought? Did somebody upset you? Did something happen from this emotion to that emotion? Or did it just come from nowhere? If it came from nowhere, well, is it beneficial? Could this be a beneficial piece of information? Or is it not? If it's not, just send it back to the universe. Tell the universe, I don't need this. This isn't mine. If it is a beneficial piece of information, ask yourself, how could I use this information to make changes I need to make? It's just a matter of, that's what I mean when I say be aware. And the more you integrate that into your life, the more the changes in your life will start to expedite. It'll come faster. It's not always going to be easy. By no means. There were things that I had to heal and get over. And there were times I sat down and I was like, Spirit, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to heal this. This is painful. There were times where I was just like, I don't feel like dealing with it at all. Crawl in bed, put that sheet over my head, and just be like, I'm done for now. I need a break. It's not about the moments of weakness when we don't want to, or we just don't have the energy. It's about the fact that we pick it back up once we regain the energy, and we keep doing it. And that is, I think, the biggest thing I can tell you. Like, spirit's supporting you. No matter how hard it is, no matter how much it hurts, spirit is there. You may not see them. I can think back to times in my life where I desperately needed spirit and I did not see them in the moment, but I can look back now and I can tell you, I know for a fact they were there.
Do you have like a community of friends or acquaintances that are sort of in this arena that have similar skills?
Not, I don't have a personal community. I don't have any friends with these skills. I only have my family, and I'm okay with that. What I have noticed is that there is an undefined community on the internet, that there are a bunch of us that aren't, I'm not the only one leaving comments in the comment section. I'm not the only one giving that information. There's an undefined community out there that's doing the same thing I am, trying to help people feel less alone in their day-to-day stress. And I think we do a pretty good job. I see a lot of positive feedback on other people's comments from people that needed to hear that. And I have a philosophy: if we could just lift one person up, if I can lift just one person up and help them, then my entire job is done. And then I'll move on to another person and help. And it's just as small as possible to create a larger goal. So there's an undefined community out there, and I think it's fabulous.
So you mentioned family. Who else in your family is like this? And do you have the consent to share that?
My daughter,
Oh, cool.
yeah, um, she's always been like this. I noticed it in her before I noticed it myself, and she, yeah,
That's
she had
great.
a conversation with my grandmother who had passed, and I called my grandmother graham crackers, and um, she comes up to me and she's like, "Look, graham crackers told me to draw her a picture." And now this is, she only met her once before she passed, and I was like, and the irony is that I had actually had a dream that my grandmother had come to talk to me while this was going on. And it was a brief, like 20-minute, like nap while somebody else was being the parent. And I was just like, and she talks to people who've passed on. Lovely. I don't know how I'm going to deal with this when she gets older. I don't know what to tell her. So when she did come to me, I was, and I understood more about the community and the psychic abilities, just not in myself. And because I'm too close to me at the time to get it, I started explaining it to her. And the first thing I did was, when you see things that scare you, ask the angels to come in and protect you. And that was the first thing I did. I said, you have to have protection, and that is how you do this, and they will protect you. And so it didn't matter what she saw, she was always felt protected and safe. She has a running dialogue with her spirit guide, and he is quite the trickster. And before, and I don't mean in the negative way that other people consider trickster energy, he just likes to joke. He's very sarcastic. And so, and there are times where before I was connected, I would go to her and be like, "Could you ask your spirit guide about this?" And it got to the point where he was like, "Could she ask her own spirit guide about this?" And we mentor, we mentor each other. If she, like, I have more of the spiritual and the scientific understanding of things, where she has more of the open and it all works kind of things. So we mentor each other, and we're very much a partnership in this journey together. And we've also recognized that it's a part of our collective together purpose, her and I. And we get along so well, thank goodness. We don't argue, we have a great relationship. And she has, hers are very mediumistic, where she gets a lot of people that have passed on that'll come and talk to her for no other reason than she's just aware they're there. They don't want anything. They don't. And I'm just like, be careful of the energy you're communicating with. She's like, "Oh, I am." She's like, "I've got it. It's okay. I've got all these rules." And it's like a playbook. So she's not, I mean, the one time, I take that back. The one time when I really realized was before she talked to my grandmother. She said, "You know, mommy, it's okay that you're going to be late today." Before I dropped her off to take care. And I'm like, there is zero reason for me to be late. And she's like, "I know, but you're going to be late, and that's fine." I go to leave, and somebody had blocked my car into my driveway on the street and then left their vehicle there. I was 15 minutes late picking her up. I was like, yep, that's my family. And I was like, I guess that was my true blue, like she's special as far as like she's already tapped in and aware she's tapped in. And I didn't want to cover that up for her because I thought that it would be a disservice because I knew what a disservice it was to me. And I was like, all kids are psychic. All kids are tapped in. It's just not pushing them out of that.
Have you felt like there's blowback from any of this in your life or for your daughter at all? Like negative consequences at all?
Uh, it's mainly just not so much for her. She's this is like a part of her to the point it's like breathing air, right? But for me, I look back at the things I could have avoided had I have only listened and not blown it off as coincidence. Like the one thing I think all of us are just innately in tune with already is our gut instinct. And I think of the times where that gut instinct could have saved me a lot of pain, a lot of just stress and anxiety. And our gut is so interconnected to our spirit. Like everybody's like, the soul's in the brain. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's all encompassing, but our gut instinct is what tells us something's wrong. It could look completely right. It could look be a beautiful day, but your gut is like, maybe you should take that umbrella, or maybe you shouldn't, leave the house today if it's possible. Maybe you should stay home. And oftentimes we blow it off as our imagination and we don't listen to it. And a lot of times what you hear people say is, oh, I wished I'd have listened to my gut. I wished I'd have listened to that because now they have all this other stuff they're dealing with and they didn't have to. And they know they didn't have to because initially they knew they shouldn't have done that thing. They shouldn't have turned down that road or they shouldn't have left at that time or they shouldn't have done this, that, or the other. And their gut was their guide. And that is our intuition. And everybody has it.
Tell us about a time you didn't listen to your gut instinct.
So I was like, I want to say 12, but I might have been 13. And as most 12 and 13-year-olds go, we don't really have a lot of like, oh, we have to be responsible. So I was saddling up my horse and I noticed that my girth, which is the strap, people that don't know that go around the belly to hold the saddle in place, the leather buckle where it goes from hole to hole had broken. But it wasn't all the way broken. There were still available holes I could use. So I didn't think anything. I was just like, we're doing this. And the whole time, my gut is like, you should just not go horseback riding today. You should just get a new girth. I'll be fine. I'm invincible. Is pretty much how I was probably thinking at that time when it came to like the idea of danger. And so I'm out in the field and I've got her saddled up and we're at a nice canter. And all of a sudden, I guess she took in a deep breath, which stripped my saddle from hole to hole. And I feel it give a little bit. And there was not enough time to stop her. So I jumped out of the saddle and did like this rolling dismount on my shoulder. But I refused to let go of the reins because I was more worried about my horse than myself. And I was worried she had already gotten spooked. Now she's at like a dead gallop and I am under her, holding on to the reins like one of those Western movies. It's uncanny. And finally, I let go of the reins and she stopped. And somebody went and retrieved her. But somebody else who witnessed the event recognized the severity and called 911 before I could say, please don't. I'll walk it off. I There was no way I was walking that off. I really thought I could. I was like, but no. The ambulance, I remember them calling into the hospital while I was en route. And I remember them saying, we have possible broken back, possible broken pelvic, collarbone, possible skull fractures. I mean, they just, I just remember being in so much just pain. I remember not being able to move. I couldn't move. It wasn't I was in too much pain to move. It was I couldn't move. The irony is that a week prior to my accident, another girl about the same age had a very similar accident, and she was in traction, complete halo. I, like 10 or 12 hours later, walked out of the hospital in crutches, and pain medication. Uh, I had torn every ligament in the right side of my body, and I spent weeks on the couch. My entire spring break was blown. And then my mom made me wait another month to get my girth so I could go back riding again, because if you fall off, get back on. And you couldn't keep me out of the saddle. There was nothing. Like I just there was no way you were keeping me out of the saddle. And that voice, it told me, and I my angels were working overtime. I should not have been as lucky as I was. My entire back was covered in bruises and black and blue from being kicked and stepped on. My horse was fine. That was my biggest concern. No matter how much pain I was in, I was like, please, is my horse okay? Please, is my horse okay? And it was just that. I still look back and I'm just like, there must have been an angel there to like protect me. There had to be.
Well, try separating a 12-year-old girl from her horse.
There, yeah.
No.
That was life.
So, you're now obviously a better listener when those voices kick in, I presume.
I am. I am.
Very
And it doesn't have to be about me either. It's like anybody in the family, and I'm just like, make sure to put on your seatbelt. They always wear their seatbelts. Unbelievable to me that people may not still do that. But and I just it's a reminder, don't get too busy, don't get wrapped in your head to the point where you forget your own safety. And I if my guts, I would rather be wrong than not listen at this point. I would rather stay home and not do it than not listen, because that can end in catastrophe.
How do you or do you address skeptics or doubters?
It depends on the type of person that I'm dealing with. A lot of times I go straight to the science. There is so much science that backs this up now, between quantum mechanics and just laws of vibration. Even Einstein's like, you can't destroy energy, and consciousness and soul is energy. So I use science. But if it's a religious, like, and people are religious and that's why they're denying it, I'm just like, there's Bible verses. God is telling you, you are these things, and that Jesus is in you, that God is in you, that you were created in his energetic image. And once I've said my piece, I don't pursue the issue. I don't argue. Maybe it's not their path, but I do want people to understand there is evidence, there is support. It's not just I think I am these things, so I am. There's quantum for sure. Quantum is what really helped me to cement it all together. And then the Bible verses, because I did grow up religious. I was very much religious when I was growing up. When I found the Bible verses, I was like, oh, I could have figured this out so much longer ago. I didn't have to wait for the double slit experiment to be like revealed to me in my algorithm. So I just and reading up on why physicists aren't connecting consciousness to quantum mechanics and understanding that really helps too. It helps me to understand why there's not more evidence. And but I understand that I'm picking up on a vibration, and that those vibrations not only come from us, but they surround us. And I don't mean like the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth. I mean like everything. Everything, it's like all at once, it's there. Even though we experience it in like 1 minute to the next, it's already there. And the one thing, like, and I hate bringing this up because there are so many stories surrounding 9/11, but I did live in New York during that time. I lived on Staten Island, and my husband was supposed to be in Manhattan. He was actually supposed to be one of the buildings adjacent. to one of the two towers. I can't remember which one. I was like, begged him. It's like, I have a really bad feeling about going in tomorrow. Please don't go to New York. I just, and I was like, I had a massive sinus infection, and I was anything to stop him from going in that day. I was like, and he knew who I was and about what I did well before I did. And he finally says, okay, I'm going to stay home with you. I know you're sick. And I just so you feel better, I'm going to stay home with you. And he woke me up that morning and gave me the news. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness you didn't go in. I went into work the very next day. I worked as a customer service agent at the hardware store. And the, the amount of stories I heard from people of the divine intervention that's placed that day. Their alarm didn't go off. They missed the train. Their car didn't start. They missed their bus. Just why they weren't there. There's just so many stories. And I was just like, that is evidence of God and divine intervention. How many people were supposed to be there that just weren't? And my husband lost family. A lot of people did, but I didn't lose him. And he has been such an integral part to my life that, and that is the one time I have to say that listening to my gut and not blowing it off as, oh, I'm just being, a bad girlfriend and I just want him to be home with me because I'm sick. Um, the one time I have to say, I'm glad I did.
How do you model this in the normalizing that we talked about, wanting to normalize this, right? That's the whole thrust of the channel. How do you think you model that, or do you even bother?
I model it in my own family. My kids, they're the ones that model it in their social groups. And if somebody comes up to me and is like, because I do interact and people do, they open up. Like if you ask a question, they want to tell you. Like people want to talk to somebody, they need that connection. So I ask questions, always ask questions. And um, when it comes to like with my children, they're both adults now, but I have my very human reaction to everyday things. My very human, oh, I just can't believe they said that reaction. But then I bring myself out of it and will discuss with my children the perspectives of the entire situation and the entire like social aspect of it and how these different perspectives are what are bringing together the the entire aspect. And I try to go into that higher self and have that above perspective because it takes me out of that, oh, I can't believe they said that, because I still get that. That's I you get that even now. There's so many people that are so stressed, and you hear nasty comments and towards people that these other people, they don't even know them, and you're just like being nasty. And I'm just like, they're having a really bad day. And I will just kind of like try to send like a calm energy towards that situation in my head. And if I can't do that, I'm either not going to think about it or I'm going to try to slip into that higher perspective so I can. Because I can't go interrupt them. I don't want to be the target. Like, nobody wants to do that. I have to, I will, but I just try to send that. And then if people direct that at me, I try to take a step back and I try to be like, I'm sorry you're really having a bad day. Is there something you want to talk about? And if they're not being too toxic or venomous, usually that brings them back down. And they're like, why am I yelling at this stranger? And it helps. And I hope that they take something away from that. I hope that that negative attitude doesn't follow them home to their families. It helps to change that perspective.
Are Are there continuing challenges in your life related to these skills, or is it just primarily that it's a positive skill set that you've got?
So there always has to be balance. And for as much positive spirit communication, there's there's some negative in there. Like I like I'll try to connect to spirit and all of a sudden I'll get this very venomous voice in my head when the energy's bad and I'm like, oh wait a minute, you're not who I want to talk to and you need to go away. Before I realized what that was, those thoughts would really bring me into this really low vibration. I would get depressed. I would have anxiety. I would second guess everything I did. It didn't matter. I would second guess what I cooked for dinner sometimes for no reason other than I could have done that wrong. And realizing that I hear the positive has also helped me to understand that I'm also hearing some negative stuff. And once you become aware of that, you become aware of that negative energy. You are able to push it off. You're able to analyze it, ask yourself, is it mine? Is there a reason I should be feeling this way? Did I do something? Most of the time, your answer is probably going to be no. And you can just be like, okay, you need to back up, go to your own corner, get out of my space, get away from my energy, and I don't want to talk to you. And that has been that realization has been so beneficial to understand that's not who I am. It's to understand what my baseline is. And I think if everybody had a better understanding of their baseline energy, which is neutral for most people, it'll help them to get rid of that negative voice in their head that they're hearing sometimes.
Have you had any experiences with Psi that aren't that voice that you thought were negative experiences?
I didn't know it at the time, but I ended up in the astral when I was really little, and I saw a demon in my room, and I could understand why it was there because I had a very negative household. So negativity attracts negativity, and I just knew if that thing touched me, that I was going to die. And now I don't know if that's a 7 year old's perspective of the situation or if that was spirit's determination of the situation. But my walls were blood red, and there was this thing sitting in the corner of the room, and I was screaming bloody murder. And my stepdad comes in and he wakes me up. But I thought I was already awake. Like there was no understanding of the transition between the two, and it went away. So I thought it was gone. And immediately upon falling back asleep, I'm back in that space, and now it's closer to me. It's like at the foot of my bed. And again, I wake up screaming. My stepdad comes in and he calms me down. It's gone. I go back to sleep. And again, now it's in my bed. It's next to me. And I am just terrified. And I, this blue light comes into my room and it's huge, like floor to ceiling, paints my whole room in this ice blue. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but I recognize it now as an angel. And it was gone. My room gone. Never again did I ever experience anything like that. I still woke up screaming because of the residual terror. And my mom is the one who came in. And when I went back to sleep, it didn't happen again. I've never encountered another entity like that in my dreams. It was so tangible. And I didn't even realize that I was astral projecting until a couple of years ago. Like I'm very dense when it comes to these things. Like I don't, it's unless somebody sits me down and is like, this is this and that is that, it takes me a long time to figure it out. Um, Once I realized that though, I was like, it brought that understanding that I had when my daughter came to me and started talking to me about astral projection. And I'm like, I don't think you should do it because I just feel like it's not safe. And now I see how unusual my experience was, because now when I look back, I'm like, wow, I've astral projected a lot. Like, I do this on a regular basis. Not that I'm trying, but this is where I go. It's an unusual experience, but it can happen. And when it does happen, it can be very scary. And to be dragged back in the way I was, because it wasn't something I was trying to do. It was just I'd go to sleep and it was there. I didn't have control over it. But it was one of those things where my daughter was talking about it. I was like, I don't think there's enough information. And the information that is there, though, mostly positive, there's some negative there that says, hey, maybe we should be some careful about some things. I was like, I just don't think we should be doing that right now.
So what what I've heard a lot as sort of this person sitting on this side of the conversation is that those of us who didn't have any mentoring for this, and those of us who aren't growing up now where there's so much information available, um, we didn't have an understanding of, oh, what I just did was astral projection, or oh, what I did was a Kundalini experience, or oh, I'm breathing through my heart. That's what that, like, we didn't have any outer guidance for that stuff. So we just sort of stumbled through, not really understanding. And certainly, until I saw the expression shared death experience, I didn't know that that's what had happened to me. I just had this thing, or this weird thing, happen when my grandpa died. It's like, no, you had a shared death experience. It's like, I read those words, it was like, ah, I'm sure you've had those light bulb moments where you watch a video and you're like, oh, that's what that's called that I did when I was 11. Is there anything we haven't discussed that you want to hit on this?
I want to tell the story about my spirit guide. So I was very curious. I don't have a lot of like family connection as far as like historically speaking, except for from my grandmother. I didn't know a whole lot about my dad's side or where we came from, and I'm very big on my roots. Like, I want to know where my family comes from. So I did a lot of research and found out that our last name comes back from a very Viking area. When my spirit guide first came through, he introduced himself as Rourke, and I'm once again still not completely there. And I'm like, that's a coincidence, or that's my imagination. I was like, okay, so Rourke, if I'm getting your name clearly, I was like, could you show me who you are? And now I'm very clairvoyant, and my messages can come through, whether it's through impressions or through like a movie screen in my head sometimes. And I got all of these images of Rourke's life and a lot of symbolism of like color. I saw a map, the location. But I've always been like, everybody's like, I have this famous ancestor. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I don't understand why that's important. And I was just like, he's a Viking. He's the beginning of the patriarchal line on my dad's side. Um, and he is my warrior spirit, and he's probably why I've survived so well. But he shows me his life, and I was like, he just it seems so random. Not random for him, just some random Viking, right? Who ends up getting into a war. I don't want to use he's like war is a bad word, but a skirmish with his dad. And so I was like, okay. And then one day I'm sitting in the car and I'm talking to my daughter, and Work's like, you should probably look up that last name and not just be like, I'm some random guy from like the Viking era. So I did, and it turns out, and like I knew it was Ireland. And so it turns out that he either is the actual like King Rourke, like clan leader, or a direct descendant of the McRourke clan. And I was like, I am not going to be one of those people that's like, I have a famous ancestor, because it was so just off the cuff. Like, I hear all of these people talk about they're this famous lineage they have. And I'm like, but today we're just average people. And I didn't think to look into it because I didn't think I'd find anything on that until he's like, you should probably actually look into it. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll look into it. And when I stumbled across it, he's like, that's me. And I'm like, okay, that's you. He has lent me his warrior spirit, and he comes to me and has always come to me in my dreams. And no, he does not look like a Viking. He looks very like modern. Um, but he does come to me in my dreams and give me advice. I always know the difference between dreams, just regular, like everyday worries that manifest in the dreamscape, but I always know the difference. The colors are so different and so vibrant. And I'll get this voice and it wakes me up. It's like, you need to pay attention. This is important. You need to tell so and so. And look at this color. Uh, and I'm like, okay. Or the dreams that I can have them years later, and all of a sudden it just picks up right where it left off and just finishes out. And I'm like, I've dreams that have done that. I know they were important. I know I've already gone through it. No idea what they meant, which is unusual for me. Usually I'm like, this means that. But there's some in there that are rattling around, just never, no idea. And I've been very blessed. I'm very dense about the whole thing until I finally became aware. But I look back on it, and for as much as I didn't listen, I did. And I think spirit is like, here's a warning. And then if you decide, because they never will take away your free will, freedom of choice, that's yours. If you don't listen, they're like, okay, so I guess this is the path we're going to go down. If you need the lesson, you're not going to listen. If you don't need the lesson, you're going to listen. And there's, you get it. Like, they will never interfere. Spirit brought me here. Spirit brought me to your video. Spirit is like, you need to do this. I'm more of a shut in. I'm more of a, I don't want to put my face to it. I'm more of a, a shadow in the comments, leaving helpful messages. But Spirit's like, no, you need to come out of your shell now. It's time for you to interact. It's time for you to share. It's time for you to really start amping up your game. So that's where I'm at, amping up my game.
Well, we really want to be that safe space where people can come and share their story and ask their questions and feel like this is not a judgment zone, right? This is where we're all somewhere on this path, whether we're paying attention to it or whether we're still a skeptic. Like, that's okay. Skeptics welcome. But I'm really pleased that you felt like the energy of this show was a good match for you and that you could come on here and share because what you have to say, look, it's out there now, right? It's
It
out
is.
there for people who need to hear it. There's now somewhere they can hear it. And like, I love that. I'm here to be a conduit for these connections. Thank you so, so much for joining us here and sharing your experiences, because that's how we're going to reach everybody.
It is. And I thank you so much for having me. Like, it has been an absolute pleasure. The whole experience has been phenomenal. Like, I have enjoyed this so much.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for having me.
My
I I really appreciate it.